Let's break it down straight from the hill to your hometown. No spin, no hype, just facts we find. AI's on the case, no truth left behind. Laws are written, deals are made. Who's got your back, who's throwing shade? We cut through the noise, decode the text, keeping it real. Congress in context, Congress in context, shining the light, breaking it down so you know what's right. Policies, votes, who's working for you? We bring the facts, the power is you.
Welcome to Congress in Context. Today we're diving deep into a document you shared with us, the Congressional Record from April 9th, 2025.
That's right.
Our mission really is to pull out the key happenings from that day, make sense of the bills, the debates, the votes, all for you.
Yep. Give you a clear picture of what went down and, maybe more importantly, why it matters.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack some pretty significant discussions.
Yeah, you'll remember seeing things about judicial activism and that No Rogue Rulings Act.
Right. And also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. Lots of talk there.
Oh, definitely. It's rules on payment apps, overdraft fees, and then, of course, the big one, the fiscal year 2025 budget resolution. That took up a lot of time.
It really did. And it wasn't just those headline items either.
No, not at all. As you probably saw flipping through, there were tributes, recognitions, foreign policy bits woven in.
Yeah, a whole range. So think of this as your kind of personalized guide. We'll hit the essentials from this, let's be honest, pretty dense record without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, let's unpack this, maybe starting with that topic that clearly sparked a lot of debate, judicial activism.
Right. So you saw a representative from South Carolina took the floor in the House, and he was talking about what he called judicial activism. Specifically, his issue was with these nationwide injunctions.
Against President Trump's administration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was the context. This whole debate about how much power one judge should have to block federal policies everywhere. It's an ongoing thing.
And that really sets the scene for this No Rogue Rulings Act. What was the main idea behind that bill?
Well, it was introduced by Congressman Darrell Issa, and it was actually set for a vote that day. And its stated purpose, basically, was to stop what they called partisan judges from abusing the Constitution.
So the argument being that these nationwide injunctions were an overreach.
That's what they argued, yeah, that a single judge could just halt something across the whole country. They saw it as messing with checks and balances.
So passing this act would mean judges couldn't issue those really broad rulings anymore.
That was the goal, yeah. To limit that authority so that, policies from the president or Congress wouldn't get blocked so easily by the judiciary. It really gets at that fundamental question about judicial review.
And you mentioned the connection to President Trump's agenda. That was pretty explicit in the record, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The representative straight up said the act was meant to let President Trump implement his agenda for families and national security without these judicial roadblocks.
So they saw these injunctions as politically motivated obstacles.
That was definitely the framing. Yeah, it really shows how intertwined the branches are and how politics shapes views on, who has what power.
And the representative finished with some pretty strong closing remarks.
He did. It was, God bless our troops. Then a warning about open borders, dictators, risk of 9/11 attacks.
Wow.
Yeah, and then saying Trump was reinstituting existing laws for protection through peace, through strength. It sort of encapsulated a whole viewpoint on security, immigration, presidential power, all laid out there.
Okay, quite a statement.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears now. Another big area from April 9th was the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Right. Two key resolutions there we should probably look at.
Let's start with SJ Res 28. What was that one about?
Okay, so SJ Res 28, its goal was to stop the CFPB from supervising payment apps from the big tech companies, like Apple Pay, Google Pay.
Ah, okay. And this caused quite a stir.
Huge partisan divide. You saw the statements. On one side, you had Mrs. Waters really opposing it.
What were her main points?
She basically called it a partisan move, a thank you gift, she said, to Elon Musk and other tech billionaires who supported Trump.
A thank you gift.
Yeah. And she raised alarms about, losing Social Security, Medicaid, linking it to Musk's ideas about government cuts and Trump's tariffs raising taxes.
So her core concern was consumer protection.
Exactly. She argued that without CFPB oversight, millions using these apps could get defrauded. It's a fast-moving digital finance world.
Right. But then you had supporters of the resolution like Mr. Flood.
Right.
What was their take?
Totally different view. Mr. Flood argued the CFPB's plan was flawed because it lumped everything together.
Like treating all payment apps the same.
Yeah, exactly. Peer-to-peer apps, digital wallets, e-commerce tools. He said they're all different business models, different risks, so a one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't work.
So their worry was it would stifle innovation.
Precisely. That was the argument, that this broad regulation would kill innovation in fintech and limit consumer choice. They wanted to prevent that.
Okay, so two very different views on regulating those payment apps. Now, the other CFPB debate was about overdraft protection, SJ Res 18. What was the goal there?
That one aimed to dismantle protections against what opponents called predatory overdraft practices. And again, very passionate debate on this one, too.
We've heard strong words from Ms. Tlaib, I remember.
Oh, yeah. She called overdraft protection a profit center for big banks disguised as a service fee.
A profit center.
Mm-hmm. She pointed out banks made over $9 billion from it last year and gave that example. A $35 charge for just a $5 purchase. That's a 700% markup, she said.
Wow. So the argument is it's excessive and hits vulnerable people hardest.
That's the core of it, yes. And Mr. Boyle echoed that, focusing on the cost to families.
What did he say?
He argued this resolution, SJ Res 18, would cost families an average of $225 more per year in overdraft fees. Collectively, like $5 billion more going to banks.
$5 billion.
Yeah. And he did the math on that $35 fee for a small short-term overdraw, came out to like 16,000% APR, called it usurious.
16,000% APR. That's staggering.
It really puts it in perspective, but then you have the other side.
Right, like Mr. Barr defending overdraft protection. How did he frame it?
Well, he strongly pushed back on the predatory label. He said the resolution wasn't about increasing fees, but about stopping a rule change that would take away a critical lifeline for people.
A lifeline, how so?
His argument was that the proposed cap, maybe like $5, would force banks and credit unions to just stop offering overdraft protection altogether.
Okay.
And that would hurt the people who actually rely on it in a pinch, maybe pushing them towards, actual predatory lenders, payday loans, that kind of thing.
He even shared a personal story, didn't he?
Yeah, about a constituent who needed it to buy a tire when she was short on funds. A real-world example of it being helpful in an emergency.
And we also heard from Mr. Stutzman, who used to run the CFPB.
Right. He called the overdraft rule a midnight rule, something rushed out by the previous administration. He suggested thinking of overdraft as insurance for consumers, a safety net.
But Mrs. Waters had a comeback for that, didn't she?
She did. She basically asked if constituents actually asked to be charged these exorbitant amounts, questioning if people would really agree to the high fees if they had a choice, even if they needed the service sometimes.
Definitely a contentious issue. And it sounds like the political temperature was high, too, with that reminder about not making personal attacks on the president.
Yeah, that little note really underlined how politically charged these regulatory debates were, how tied they are to the executive branch and Congress's reaction.
Okay, let's move on to another huge piece of business from April 9th. The fiscal year 2025 budget resolution, HCON Res 14. Specifically considering the Senate's changes.
Right, a really critical step in the whole budget process. And as you probably saw, they first had to deal with House Resolution 313.
Which sets the rules for debate.
Exactly, just setting the rules for debating the budget resolution itself. And even that procedural step can be, well, partisan.
And the resolution itself. Very different takes, I imagine. Let's start with the Republican view, Mrs. Fox.
Okay. Mrs. Fox presented it as key to advancing President Trump's America First agenda, fulfilling the mandate from the November elections, she said.
Unlocking the path forward.
That was her phrase, yeah, delivering on commitments. And she really pushed back hard against the Democratic criticisms, claims about hurting groups, the middle class, cutting benefits. She said that was not even remotely true.
Did she contrast it with the previous administration's economics?
Oh, yes. She mentioned Bidenomics, claimed it cost families over $11,000 a year more. And she highlighted the resolution's focus on American energy dominance, wanting to get back to the energy independence they saw under Trump's first term.
Okay, so a focus on fulfilling promises and energy. Now, the Democrats, Mr. McGovern leading the charge, Very different view.
Completely different. He called it a lousy budget, said it would hurt working families, people in poverty.
Strong language.
Very. He criticized what he saw as billionaires telling the middle class to sacrifice, pointed to Trump's tariffs hurting working folks, and he accused Republicans of using fear tactics, spreading lies about the budget.
He mentioned something about an amendment on billionaire taxes being rejected.
Yeah, that was a key point for them. An amendment to block tax cuts for billionaires was voted down on party lines. They used that to argue the budget favors the super rich. And he raised big concerns about cuts to health care, especially Medicaid.
And other Democrats echoed those worries. Mr. Pallone, Mr. Panetta.
Yes, Mr. Pallone specifically said the resolution directs his committee to cut Medicaid by at least $880 billion.
$880 billion.
While extending tax cuts for the rich and corporations, adding to the debt. And Mr. Panetta called it disastrous, debt inflating, hiding the cost of tax cuts for billionaires and adding, he claimed, $4.6 trillion to the national debt.
$4.6 trillion. These are huge numbers being thrown around.
Massive potential impacts they were highlighting. But, Republicans like Mr. Arrington defended the process.
How did he justify supporting it despite the criticism?
He kind of framed it as just a necessary first step, like a baseball scrimmage, he said, just to get the budget process rolling.
A scrimmage.
Yeah. He stressed that Republicans don't get many chances to use reconciliation, that process, for passing budget-related bills with just 51 votes in the Senate, so they shouldn't waste this chance to push their agenda, given their mandate.
But the Democratic condemnation didn't let up.
Not at all. Miss Plaskett's words were really sharp, appalling, brazen cruelty, flagrant deceit. She brought up that $880 billion Medicaid cut again, linking it to $7 trillion in tax giveaways for billionaires and corporations. Said it would hurt veterans, seniors, kids.
Wow. But then Republicans like Mr. Smith had a counter-argument about taxes, right? Saying a no vote would mean tax hikes.
Exactly. Mr. Smith argued that if the resolution didn't pass, the existing tax cuts would expire, and that would mean tax increases for, he claimed, 95% of families, not just the wealthy.
So impacting almost everyone.
That was his point. And he specifically mentioned the 99A provision for small businesses, saying its expiration would be a huge blow, making it harder for them to compete, so framing a no vote as the harmful option.
We also heard Republicans talk a lot about border security in relation to the budget.
Yes, Mr. Pfluger was vocal on that. Said this budget gives Border Patrol the tools they need, unlike the previous administration. He mentioned cartels having better tech than our agents, stressing the need for more resources there.
And government waste was another justification from their side.
Mr. Gooden said taxpayers are furious about wasted money, both abroad and at home, and implied this budget was trying to address that, though maybe light on specifics in that particular exchange.
But the Democrats kept hammering on the economic impacts and safety net concerns.
Absolutely. Ms. Escobar argued things like prices and inflation were up under Republican control, retirees losing money. Repeated the line about prioritizing billionaires over Medicaid and nutrition, exploding the debt by $6 trillion.
$6 trillion now. The numbers kept changing.
Well, different ways of calculating the impact over different time frames, I suppose. Ms. Capture echoed the concerns, too. Seniors' health care, vets' meds, kids' food, all being cut, she argued, to benefit the wealthy.
And Mr. Emma warned about even broader cuts.
Yeah, he listed off potential cuts. Food aid, housing, school meals, clean energy, even selling public lands. All, he said, to pay for the tax cuts while still increasing the debt.
Interesting tangent mentioned about Medicaid work requirements in Georgia. What was that?
Just a brief note in the record that Georgia's experiment with adding work requirements to Medicaid had run into significant problems. Apparently, it wasn't achieving its goals of getting people health care or getting them to work. A little real-world data point dropped into the debate.
Okay. And then came the votes on the budget resolution itself. What happened?
First, they voted on the procedural step, ordering the previous question on HRes 313, basically ending debate on the rules. That passed 213 to 203, pretty much party lines.
And the final vote on the budget resolution, HCon Res 14.
That passed 212 to 204. Again, very tight, reflecting those deep divisions we've been talking about. A big step forward in the budget fight.
Clearly, April 9th was packed with major partisan clashes. But the Congressional Record captures so much more, doesn't it? Lots of other things happened.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a mix. You have the big fights, but also the day-to-day business of Congress. It started, as usual, with the pledge, led by Mr. Wilson from South Carolina. The journal from the day before was approved. There was an opening prayer, the standard routines.
And then a lot of recognitions and tributes.
Yeah, quite a few. Mr. Williams from Texas honoring his friend Joshua King, recognizing Aaron Rodgers for his perseverance.
Like a quarterback.
Yep. Congratulating Nova Southeastern University for their NCAA Division II basketball win. Acknowledging a young musician, Soren Morelli, picked for the Pittsburgh Symphony. Commending Paige Buchers as she headed to the WNBA draft. It connects Congress back to communities and achievements.
It's a nice reminder amidst all the policy jargon.
It is. And also recognizing first responders in northern Michigan for their work during bad weather. Important local stuff getting noted.
Were there other specific policy concerns raised outside the big debates?
There were. Mr. DeSaulnier expressed worry about cuts at the Department of Education and moving programs for students with disabilities over to HHS. Concerns about how those services might be affected.
And some smaller bills moved forward, too.
Yes, like the Prioritizing Veterans Survivors Act, H.R. 1228. It aimed to clarify how the VA's Office of Survivors Assistance is organized. It actually passed the House. Shows that sometimes things can move even on specific issues.
And sometimes personal stories get shared to make a policy point.
Definitely. Mrs. Bush shared Fatima's story, raising concerns about the healthcare system potentially ignoring Black women's pain, using a specific experience to talk about broader issues like health equity.
What other kinds of topics popped up?
All sorts. Mr. Downing highlighted his bill, the Safeguarding Property Act, wanting to add property crimes to the list of deportable offenses. Mr. Stanton criticized economic uncertainty he blamed on Trump's policies, even with tariff pauses. Just shows the sheer breadth of issues members deal with.
Yeah, it really is a wide spectrum.
Totally. From honoring local leaders like Deb DeLuca in Duluth and Francie Pepper for her advocacy work, to remembering sacrifices like Mr. Waltz reflecting on his father's Marine Division in WWIBY, expressing condolences for a tragedy in Santo Domingo, even reacting to comments by public figures like Mr. Latimer criticizing remarks by Elon Musk.
Well, Elon Musk came up again.
Seems so. Then you had discussions on work requirements, Mr. Mooney arguing against disincentives to work or marriage, support for Maui's dislocated workers program from Ms. Takuda, calls for focusing on free trade, not tariffs, from Mr. Barra, concerns about Social Security funding from Mrs. McLean Delaney. It's just a lot.
A real mix, including oversight, like Mr. Gates talking about the crime victims fund balance increasing due to oversight.
Exactly, and foreign policy snippets. Mr. Self-affirming support for Israel, Mr. Schiff voicing concern over Palestinian casualties in Gaza, Mr. Blumenauer hitting Trump's tariffs again, calling them chaotic, sharing a business leader's supply chain worries, support voiced for Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel.
Okay, so that covers a lot of the House side. What about the Senate record for April 9th? Similar variety.
Very similar. A big debate in the Senate was about the VA workforce. Senator Blumenthal, worried about cuts, wanted a resolution to restore staffing.
Was there pushback?
Yeah. Senator Moran argued the VA needs better people, not necessarily more, so he objected to the resolution. Different takes on how to improve the VA.
What else stood out in the Senate?
Senator Banks gave his maiden speech, talked about his background, decline of working-class jobs, blamed America Last policies, warned about China, supported Trump's agenda, kind of laying out his perspective.
Any updates on specific state issues?
Senator Blackburn updated on Tennessee storms and relief efforts. Senator Scott of Florida talked about his fight against government waste, fraud, abuse. The Social Security debate surfaced there, too. Scott refuting claims Republicans want to destroy it. Sanders arguing against VA cuts linked to tax cuts for the wealthy.
So the budget arguments echoed in the Senate.
Definitely. And foreign policy, too. Senators Grassley and Leahy discussed problems with resettling Afghan allies. Senator Leahy criticized Trump's tariffs on allies like Israel and Ukraine.
Did everyone agree on the tariffs?
No, Senator Vance defended them as necessary for rebuilding America with American labor, objected to exempting Israel and Ukraine. So disagreement there, too. They also voted to confirm Pete Hoekster's nomination.
What about that TikTok law? Still being debated.
Yep. Senator Cotton objected to changing the law, reiterated his view that it's a Chinese communist spy app, so that fight wasn't over.
Any other confirmations or legislative actions?
Paul Atkins' nomination to the SEC was reported, and the Senate passed a resolution disapproving a Department of Energy rule on water heater energy standards. Each year runs 20.
I disapproved a rule.
Oh, yeah. Using the Congressional Review Act, same tool used in some of those CFPB debates. And on a later note, Senator Durbin shared a history of McDonald's.
McDonald's? Really?
Yeah, sometimes those local history or cultural moments make it into the record.
Okay. Any other Senate business? Arms sales, recognitions.
Yep. Notification about a potential arms sale to Australia. Senator Johnson objected to a nomination because a cybersecurity report wasn't released, mentioned whistleblower concerns, recognitions for the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce Centennial, Archbishop Noman in Kansas City, a retiring city administrator in Missouri, lots of local honors.
And new bills introduced.
Quite a few. On the Earned Income Credit, union station, rural health care, bankruptcy protections, including specifics on severance pay and collective bargaining, bipartisan bill on adult education, resolution supporting LGBTQI plus youth, Arctic engagement, National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, appointments announced, committee meetings scheduled. The whole machinery of the Senate was churning.
So, looking back at April 9th through this Congressional Record deep dive, wow, it was definitely a packed day on Capitol Hill.
It really was. We saw those intense debates on judicial power, the fights over financial regulations, the CFPP stuff.
Right, affecting payment apps, overdraft fees.
And that huge, contentious budget resolution really shows the different philosophies and priorities clashing in Congress, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But beyond those big fights, it's important, like you said, to see all the other activity.
Yeah, the recognitions of people and groups doing good work, the discussions on veterans affairs, foreign policy details, economic stability worries. It's all in there.
We really hope this walkthrough of just one day in the record has given everyone listening some useful context, a clearer picture of the issues shaping things.
But it is just a snapshot, right? Each of these topics, judicial philosophy, financial regulation, the budget, they all deserve way more attention.
Definitely. So as you think about what we've discussed, what stood out most to you? What questions pop into your head now? We really encourage you to dig deeper into whatever caught your interest. Stay engaged with these processes because, well, they impact all of us.
Absolutely. Staying informed is key. And remember, the Congressional Record itself is online. There are nonpartisan groups that analyze this stuff, too. Your informed voice really matters in how things play out.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Congressional Record.
Glad to be here.
We'll be back soon with another exploration into the sources that matter to you.